My name is Alex, and this story takes place when I was just 16. Autumn had always held a special place in my heart. I adored watching the last crimson leaves cling to the skeletal branches of trees. It was a season filled with beauty and melancholia. And for me, bored in my small town life, there was nothing better than soaking in the scenery. My friends Jake and Maya, however, had grown weary of my restlessness. They insisted that I needed an adrenaline rush to shake things up. I responded with an exaggerated eye roll, but that did little to sway their determination.
Alex, you know that old Miller's place? The shack that's practically falling apart. It's only a few miles into Blackwood Forest. Sure, it sounds spooky, but it's not haunted, just old.
Jake suggested one day, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Blackwood Forest was more than just old, it was legendary in our town. Whispers clung to it like ancient moss on trees, filled with tales of strange disappearances and unsettling sounds that loomed over anyone brave enough to venture inside. The old Miller's place was a logging cabin abandoned over 50 years ago, rumored to harbor a dark soul trapped within its walls. Normally, I'd scoff at ghost stories, but the thought of being alone in that eerie place, surrounded by the forest's whispers, sparked something deep inside me. It wasn't a dare from Jake or Maya, but rather a challenge I set for myself. So on a brisk Tuesday afternoon, I grabbed a small hiking bag and filled it with essentials: a flashlight, a compass, a bottle of water, and my dad's old hunting knife. As I stood by the front door, double-checking my gear for this adventure I was about to embark on, I called out, "Dad, I'm just going for a long walk." He didn't seem worried. After all, I had a knack for enjoying long walks during the autumn season. The crunch of fallen leaves beneath my feet signaled that I had stepped onto the familiar and well-trodden paths of Blackwood Forest. As I inhaled deeply, the crisp scent of pine trees with the damp earth was a refreshing exhilaration that made me grateful to be out in nature. However, as I pushed deeper, the atmosphere began to shift. The woods grew denser and the sunlight dimmed, with the vibrant oranges of the outer edges giving way to stark browns and grays that felt almost foreboding. Before long, it seemed as though the trees were closing in around me, their branches intertwining overhead to form a skeletal canopy that obscured the sky, making it feel like I was stepping into another realm. The air turned colder, and the silence thickened, reminiscent of something out of a horror film. Yet, I refused to let fear make me feel like a timid mouse, so I pressed on, determined to confront whatever lay ahead. By the time I reached the Miller place, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the western sky in shades of bruised purples and fiery reds. The cabin appeared just as people had described it, yet somehow even worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't merely old or decayed, bore the scars of time and neglect. The front porch sagged precariously, overtaken by invasive vines that seemed to be reclaiming the structure for nature. The windows resembled gaping, empty eye sockets, and the roof had collapsed in several areas. A chill ran down my spine, and I sensed that this unease had little to do with the autumn air. Something felt profoundly wrong, but I couldn't back down from the dare that had brought me here. I realized that the hunting knife tucked away in my hiking backpack would likely be useless against whatever I might encounter inside the cabin. Yet the whisper of challenge in my mind urged me to move forward. With a deep breath to steady myself, I approached the Miller place and pushed open the flimsy, rotting door. It groaned in protest before crashing to the ground with a startling thud. A thick cloud of ancient dust billowed up, catching the feeble rays of sunlight that managed to penetrate the gloom. The interior revealed a large room strewn with debris. There was a broken table, a rusty chair, and what appeared to be the remnants of a cot, all coated in a fuzzy layer of grime. I called out a hesitant hello, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence, sounding thin, almost childish, and completely out of place. There was no reply, just the wind whistling mournfully through the gaps in the walls. I reached into my hiking backpack and pulled out the flashlight, its beam a feeble spear against the encroaching darkness. As I swept it around the room, something caught my eye in the corner, glinting faintly. I made my way over to a pile of rotting newspapers, using my free hand to shift them aside while the flashlight illuminated my path. That's when I spotted it, an old, tarnished locket, half buried beneath the debris. I picked it up, its weight surprising me. The locket felt cold to the touch, and as I directed the beam of light onto it, I noticed its golden hue when I pried it open with my free hand. I was met with a faded, blurry photograph of a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 7. There was something unsettling about her solemn gaze. I felt an inexplicable urge to keep it, quickly shoving it into my pocket. Before long, the sunset surrendered to full darkness, and the temperature inside the Miller place dropped significantly. I tried to convince myself that it was just the open roof or the drafty walls, but a prickling sensation crawled across my skin, making me uneasy. I felt the unsettling impression of being watched. Every creak and rustle of the leaves outside sent a jolt through me, making me jump at the thought of something sinister lurking nearby. Realizing it was time to leave, I turned toward the entrance. But then a loud thump echoed from the back of the room near the crumbling fireplace. I spun around, flicking my flashlight beam wildly, but all I could see were the dusty shadows dancing under the wavering light. I tried to call out a hesitant, "Hello," but my voice came out as nothing more than a whisper. That's when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the giggle of a child. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, and the playful sound sent goosebumps racing across my skin. This couldn't be a child or my friends. I was all alone in this desolate area. Panic began to set in. This place was no longer just an old logging cabin. There was something, or someone, here with me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind, or a wild animal, or perhaps my imagination was running wild. But then I heard the giggling again, this time much closer. A rhythmic tapping sound echoed from directly above me, seemingly emanating from the collapsed ceiling. My breath hitched in my throat, and in a surge of instinct, I bolted, bursting out of the Miller place. I plunged into the dense darkness of the Blackwood Forest. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, barely illuminating the skeletal branches overhead. I swung my flashlight around, but it barely helped. The trees, once majestic, now loomed like grasping claws, their branches reaching out to snag my clothes as I stumbled through. The ground, which had felt like a soft carpet of leaves earlier, transformed into a treacherous crunching trap. Each footfall echoed loudly in the eerie silence, announcing my presence to whatever was lurking in the shadows. Now, I wasn't just running from an old cabin. I was fleeing from a horrifying sound. The giggling seemed to follow me, sometimes distant, sometimes alarmingly close, weaving through the trees. But it was now mingling with another sound, a heavy, dragging noise. It sounded as though something heavy was being pulled across the forest floor. The rustle of leaves around me wasn't matching my frantic escape. As I stumbled, I went headfirst into a pile of damp leaves, feeling my flashlight slip from my grasp and vanish into the all-consuming darkness around me. My heart raced, tight knot forming in my chest as I frantically searched for the flashlight. My hands brushed against the cold earth, sharp twigs, and jagged rocks, desperation fueling my movements. Fortunately, the flashlight had rolled beneath a thick bush, and since it was a heavy-duty tactical model, The beam persisted, illuminating a small patch of ground. That's when I noticed it, a single, muddy boot print. It was too small to belong to an adult, and of course, animals didn't wear boots. A chill ran through my veins. Then, I heard it, the dragging sound, now alarmingly close, just beyond the bush, accompanied by those childlike giggles that no longer sounded innocent. They were ragged and strained, almost resembling sobs. I quickly snatched up the flashlight, my hands shaking violently as I pointed the beam forward. My breath caught in my throat when I spotted a figure standing about 20 feet away, partially obscured by the trunks of two towering pine trees. It was a girl, small and slender, almost ghostly pale in the flashlight's glow. She wore a tattered old white dress, her head tilted slightly, and though I couldn't make out many features, there was an unsettling stillness about her, a profound sense that something was terribly wrong. As she began to raise her head, as if preparing to do something, a scream built in my throat. I didn't want to see what came next. Adrenaline surged through me, pure and potent, propelling me to my feet, despite the sharp pain radiating from my twisted ankle I had gotten from my fall. I had no intention of dying in the middle of the forest, so I ran. Ignoring the searing pain, I pushed myself harder than I ever had before, tearing through the skeletal branches that clawed at my clothes and skin. The Blackwood Forest morphed into a blur of dark shapes and terrifying sounds. I had no idea where I was headed. I just needed to escape. The loud, dragging, and giggling noises continued to echo behind me, sometimes distant, sometimes alarmingly close, and I felt a cold breath at the nape of my neck as I sprinted. With the flashlight beam aimed ahead, I noticed its light seemed to diminish, struggling to fend off the encroaching horrors that surrounded me. Then, through the trees, I spotted a faint, distant glow. It was the lights of my town. A rush of hope surged through my chest, igniting my weary lungs and aching muscles. I pushed past the last of the skeletal branches and stumbled out of the Blackwood Forest onto a gravel road that would lead me to the main road of the town. I didn't really pay much attention as I sprinted through the vast expanse of the forest, pushing myself until I finally saw the comforting glow of the streetlights. It was only then that my legs buckled beneath me, and I collapsed onto the asphalt, gasping for breath. The details of my walk back home were a blur, but the overwhelming joy that washed over me as I spotted my house, its warm lights glowing invitingly, is something I'll never forget as I stepped onto the front porch. I slipped inside, and to my surprise, my dad was still glued to the TV. I locked the door behind me and sank against it, feeling my body tremble. When I looked at my hands, they were marred with bloody scratches, and I noticed the dirt and torn fabric of my clothes. I never really shared the whole story with my dad or my friends. I skated over the details, mumbling about tripping, twisting my ankle, and getting lost, conveniently blaming my compass for my disorientation. They all just shook their heads, probably chalking it up to my usual clumsiness. But I was acutely aware of what truly transpired. My skepticism had been shattered in the terrifying depths of Blackwood Forest, replaced by chilling certainty that some things are best left undisturbed. It's been 2 years since my last adventure at the Miller place, yet that locket remains in a drawer, a haunting reminder of that fateful night in the forest which revealed its true, chilling nature. I still wander through Blackwood Forest, but I never ventured deep enough to catch sight of the Miller place again. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I could swear I hear a faint, childlike giggle lingering at the edge of my hearing, a sound that has become a permanent resident in the back of my mind. I'm safe, I tell myself. I made it out. Yet a part of me, the part that clings to that locket, knows I left a piece of myself behind in those dark autumn woods. I'll never truly be the same again.